We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, and now in Albuquerque, New Mexico at 1000 KKIM. Our guest by phone, Assemblyman Tim Donnelly, who is entertaining the idea of maybe running for governor of this glorious state we have here in California.
So, Marty, by the time you get done announcing all the stations, we have no time for our guests.
Well, I think we're picking up a station in Wyoming next, and then one in Colorado. They're going to put us in all the really, highlighted places here.
Yeah, we got to start putting on a farm show. Tim, I've heard a lot of discussions on Proposition 13. What's going on with Proposition 13 and taking away the deductions?
Well, there's two very clear assaults on Proposition. One is going to be the split roll, where they divide the residential homeowners from the business people who own commercial property, and that's a very, very real threat. And the other one seeks to eliminate the protections that, in terms of how much your property tax can increase per year. The bottom line is Prop 30 is going to spike revenues for a year. We all know that because it was retroactive. After that, it is more than likely going to plummet because a lot of people are going to change their behavior. Mm-hmm. The wealthiest among us can choose to do whatever they want to do with their money. They don't have to work every day. If you're in the top 1%, you probably don't have to work the rest of your life in some cases.
That's why we're here.
You're free to leave the state. You're free to close your business. You're free to move your business. You're free to move your residence to another state, even if you stay here and have a home here.
Well, we had a golfer that tried to move his business, but the state wouldn't let him.
Oh, Michelson.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, what are they going to do? Are we going to be the state where they build a wall to keep people from leaving California?
Probably.
I mean, pretty soon we're going to run out of money, and we're not even going to have the illegals trying to the border to get into California. They're going to want to go someplace like Texas where there's actually jobs. Into that, I heard the governor of Texas is sending these beautiful wooden boxes out to business owners in California with a cell phone inside, and it has one number programmed into it. And if they dial that number, they are speaking personally to the governor of Texas.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a great idea, but why isn't the governor of California sending that box out? Oh, of course, if the governor of California sent it out, it would have to be maybe a union caravan would have to drive it down there, and then they'd have to take meals and breaks, and we couldn't do it efficiently. We couldn't use technology. Have you noticed that none of the technology efficiencies that have literally transformed business and made it incredibly cheap to do all kinds of things? We used to send FedEx or UPS overnight packages to get a document somewhere. Now we don't even fax them anymore. We just scan them and email them.
Tim, I want to move on to something else real quick. What about a part-time legislation that Shannon Grove and Michael Regan have been pushing?
Well, a part-time legislature is a great idea. Absolutely. You limit the damage that these people can do. The only problem with that is right now, if we had a part-time legislature and we had the exact same people in power who are leftists and who are socialists who think government's the solution to every problem, they would still pass 2,200 bills like they're doing this year.
Well,
so I don't think that alone will solve our problems. I think in the future, down the road, I think we should push for it. I think we should implement it. But I believe if we don't fundamentally transform the power structure in California and put the people back in charge and get some semblance of representation, then California won't change its direction.
Well, I look at what Texas is doing. And they have a part-time legislature. They're leading the nation in jobs. They're leading the nation in having extra reserves. And California just keeps going downhill. So I have to say,
almost everything Texas does is a model for what we should do.
Definitely.
They spend $2.7 billion on their corrections, on their prison system. They have the exact same number of prisoners we do, or at least that we used to. We've dumped them all in the streets, but we still pay the same rate. $10 billion. So more than 3 times what Texas spends, and we don't even keep them behind bars. we're dumping them out on the streets, hardened criminals into your community.
We're having a conversation with Assemblyman Tim Donnelly, who is entertaining the idea of running for governor of California.
Tim, I hate to keep jumping around, but I'd only have you for a few minutes, and I'm wondering what you're feeling regarding a single-payer health care system that the state of California keeps trying to implement.
I think that is an unmitigated disaster. I think every single... We just had a hearing on this the other day. The government is doing what government always does. It takes out all the market forces, all the incentives for you to line up your behavior. For instance, smokers or people who are obese under Obamacare, they pay a higher rate because they need more health care, essentially, at some point. And so that's what it costs. In California, we've just decided that we're going to spread that risk to everybody else, so there's no incentive to change your behavior and become healthy.
Well, you know,
there's no incentive when you have a financial incentive lined up with a health incentive. Then you're aligning the motivations of individuals to do the right thing. I think the single most significant thing we can do to bring down the cost of healthcare, which is the biggest problem. Healthcare is unaffordable to many people, and so they go without. And Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, is going to make it more unaffordable. If we had health savings accounts like Dr. Benjamin Carson suggested, if every single person had one and they paid cash for their health care, they would care how much it costs. Competition would be created. Costs would come down, and all of the insurance bloat that occurs would disappear, because when somebody else is paying for something, people don't treat it as if they're paying for it, even if they pay the premium.
Well, one of the things, I'm in the healthcare business, and one of the things I have discovered is a program where I can give a group of 51 and above a full medical plan for $100 a month that qualifies under Obamacare. So I have an answer. All I need to do is have people get a hold of me. But one more question. Meg Whitman recently changed her position on same-sex marriage. What's your position on same-sex marriage?
My position on same-sex marriage is very simple. I believe that marriage is between one man and one woman, that it is a sacred covenant ordained by God, and that it belongs in the church. I don't think government ought to be involved in it at all. I don't think they ought to define it or try to redefine it.
You know, Tim, I like that answer. I think we're going to get along very well. I have another question for you, though. This is Marty again. I noticed there was a joint resolution on the sequester. Washington and Sacramento are a little bit at odds. I know it's hard to believe that you guys don't get along up there. But we had George Will on the show the other day, and I liked his idea. He said, hey, let the thing fall apart, and then let the chips fall where they may afterwards. But I guess there was a resolution that you guys were against, going to Washington saying that we should allow them to spend more of our tax money up there. Yeah, well, the resolution was very controversial for even the most liberal Republicans, because it essentially endorsed a tax increase. It said the only solution is a tax increase. We have to take a balanced approach, blah, blah, blah. Look, I looked at the sequester. I looked at what it does. It does disproportionately target the defense industry where there are people working. I have a prejudice toward people who are working versus people who are on entitlements. You know, one thing that I did a little bit of research on was the growth of entitlements. Since 1960, so for the past 50 years, entitlements have grown almost 10%, 9.5%. Think about that. That's extraordinary. If you could get that return on investment, you'd be a millionaire or a millionaire, depending on what you started with. And I think this nonsense of making all this noise over 2.5 cents on the dollar would need to be shrinking and streamlining government. We need to completely redefine the role of government in our lives. That's the reality. Everybody knows this. The other side, the left, they say it's not complicated. It's going to be painful, and they don't want to do it because they'll lose votes. Well, and they're doing a lot of showboating stuff right now. Like, the announcement yesterday was they're cutting out White House tours. I mean, big deal because of the sequester. Come on,
well, I heard
give us a break
they weren't going to enforce the border anymore. And I started laughing. I said, when were they ever doing that?
Yeah, that's no change. So, they're trying to make things dramatic. They're trying to, they're trying to do things that showboat their point of view, but there's really no essence to it, because what are we looking at? Less than 1.5% of what the real budget is anyways? Total expenses?
We're all fixated on the wrong thing.
Yeah, I totally agree.
If we're not moving in the direction of government to live within its means, it's not even worth the conversation.
Yeah, it's what's the point?
Everybody has to take cuts. That's life. The private sector, I mean, look back at 2009. As soon as the crash started, right after that, Caterpillar laid off 20,000 people.
Yeah, and that was
because they knew they wouldn't have the money to pay for them. They wouldn't have the business. That's responsible. We need to get back to the idea of personal responsibility, of initiative, that we govern ourselves. We don't wait for the government to tell us what to do and what's right. It's time we have a political revolution and throw the political class out on its ear.
Tim, I
put
totally,
the people back in charge.
We totally agree. We're out of time. Thank you so much for being here, and we would love to have you back in a couple months.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Assemblyman.
Thank you, Tim.
Godspeed.
Take care now. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180.